Now we can remove that fuel rail. Just unbolt the three 12mm bolts using a wrench and disconnect the 4 fuel injector connectors. Then pull the rail away from the head and move it aside. Now it's on to my favorite part, turbocharger goodness. On this MR2 we really lucked out here. Since we have the Autolab aftermarket turbo kit installed, removing the turbo from the head is much easier than the stock setup. All we have to do is unbolt the 3 bolts holding the downpipe onto the exhaust, disconnect the oil and coolant lines, unbolt the exhaust manifold from the head, and just move it away from the head enough to clear the exhaust manifold studs. If you have the stock catalytic converter and exhaust manifold, you'll need to remove the turbocharger assembly before unbolting the head. Take a look at Lovehorsepower.com for more instructions. Let's remove those 2 bolts holding the water pipe onto the head. One is located close to the distributor, and the other is on the exhaust side of the engine near the oil pressure sensor. Alright, if you made it this far, congratulations. With the turbocharger removed, we're on to the final step, the timing belt. Now in this case, we're going to be reusing that belt, but if you want to replace it, the process is almost the same. You just need to remove that lower timing belt cover and the crankshaft pulley. Now we're going to get a jack under the oil pan to remove that passenger side engine mount. Start by placing a jack under the oil pan and jacking up the engine slightly. Don't worry, that oil pan is tough. Then unbolt the one 12mm bolt, 2 nuts underneath the engine mount, and the 17mm through bolt. Remove the 5 10mm bolts on the upper timing belt cover and remove it. If you're reusing the timing belt, mark the belt in several places with white paint. Also mark the belt where the lower timing belt cover intersects the belt. Using a 19mm socket, turn the engine from the crankshaft pulley bolt until you reach top dead center. Check that the circular mark on each timing pulley is lined up with the marks on the metal timing belt cover. Now remove the timing belt tensioner with the 2 bolts. After that's removed, you can now pull the timing belt off of the pulleys. Okay, we got our distributor removed, and we found out that it was seriously leaking oil, so we gotta get this thing fixed. Now next up, we pulled off this coolant neck here. We're gonna have to replace this gasket. Finally, we got our intake manifold removed. Now it gave us a little bit of a struggle at first, but once we got those wires out of the way, this thing comes right out. Now we cleaned it up with some engine degreaser and some brake cleaner. As you can see right in here, that's the cold start injector. What's that? You want me to run more boost? I'm just kidding, intake manifolds can't talk. So now that we got this thing cleaned up, we're ready to unbolt the 10 head bolts and get that head off. Let's go get it done. Now let's get that valve cover off by removing the 10 Phillips screws. Make sure you clean really good around the area before pulling the cover. You don't want any dirt to get in there. The head bolts are now visible. You'll need a special 12-point socket to remove them. I found a tool at the local parts store. You can unbolt the 10 bolts. Make sure to loosen them in the correct order and in several passes. Some of the bolts you cannot pull out until you take off the camshafts, but they can all still be loosened and the head removed. Before we pull the head off, let's just get those spark plugs out. And now the moment of truth. Let's pull that head on off. Make sure to check for any wires or anything else that might hang up on the head. When pulling on the head, be careful not to scratch the aluminum surface, especially on those dowels sticking out from the block. Then just pull it out and you've got it done.
No, I'm snagged.
Now, on the next episode of Lovehorsepower.com, we're going to show you how to disassemble the head and clean the valves and combustion chambers and replace those valve stem seals. We'll also be reinstalling the head using a TRD head gasket and ARP hardware. That and much more on the next episode of Lovehorsepower.com. We'll see you then.